So my name's Simon Brown, Head of Learning Transformation from Lloyds Banking Group. I don't think Lloyds needs too much introduction, but I'd like to just get a feel for who perhaps is a customer of Lloyds Bank within the room. So if you've got a current account or a savings account with Lloyds, could I just get you to raise your hand and keep them up? If you've also got insurance maybe with Lloyds, or a mortgage with Lloyds, or with Halifax, you raise your hand as well, or with Scottish Widows, or with Bank of Scotland, or maybe a car through Black Horse Finance, or through Lex Auto Leasing. All of those are within Lloyds Banking Group, so that's probably half the room, I think, that put their hand up at some point there. So all of that will be... or shares as well, who will have done very well as the highest performing share last year on the FTSE. So... I'd like to take credit for that, but so. And I won't let you carry on the race. So let me take you through the change that we've been on for the last 2 years. So if we go back to the beginning of, or to the end of 2010, we realised that there was an opportunity to improve learning across Lloyds. So we knew we had a high number of colleagues looking at the benchmarks compared to other organisations. We knew that the feedback from the business was that learning wasn't necessarily aligned with what the business needs, but we couldn't really tangibly explain that. We knew that only 20% of our learning was done through e-learning, about 70% was done in the classroom, and that didn't feel like the best possible mix. And scarily, we knew that 42% of our classroom training was actually getting used. So if we ran a course of 10 people, 3 people wouldn't get scheduled on, so you immediately had 3 empty seats, and then 3 people either wouldn't complete the course or wouldn't turn up. So only 4 out of those 10 were actually getting the investment, or the benefit of the investment we were making. So not a good place to be. We knew that the technology platform was outdated. It can take 15 clicks to get to the right piece of learning. Most people lose faith somewhere along the way unless it's absolutely critical or mandatory training that they have to do. And we knew that there was an opportunity there, so lots of cost pressures, so an opportunity to potentially make some savings in what we were spending, improve the agility of learning, reduce the risk of what we were doing, take out duplication, etc. So we built a business case around how we could improve learning, and that business case, being open, was built around savings that we could make, but the power behind that business case was actually not in the savings, but in the value of what, if we got learning right, we could actually do. So what was it that we actually found out? So we dug in and did a 3-month diagnostic to really understand the detail of what we were doing. And that told us we had close to 1,000 people in the learning function. 1,000 people. That was trainers, that was operations, that was the management of learning. It told us we were delivering just over 5 days of training per colleague, so 5.3 training days per colleague. We had 7,000 courses in our catalogue, which we were trying to maintain and choose the right course. And in that, just on health and safety, there was nearly 700 on health and safety alone. Trying to manage our supplier base, we had over 1,300 suppliers that were providing training to the bank, and some of those were having different pricing in different parts of the bank. And only 20% of what we were doing was through e-learning. We didn't have a common structure for the curriculum. Not everyone knew what learning they needed to do. They went to different places to access it. There were multiple competency frameworks, no single view of what learning we were delivering, and we were spending over £100 million. That was the case for why we needed to change things. We looked at things like Burson, and we looked at where we stood on the benchmarks, and it told us that we were spending more per colleague on learning than other organisations. That could be a good thing. Great to be investing in learning, but not when you couple that with actually not all of that being done efficiently. It told us that we had generally more members of staff in learning than the benchmarks. But the good news was we were actually delivering more training per learner than the benchmarks as well. So something was good there. We were actually giving people more training than other organisations, but we were spending more, maybe good, probably not with all of those inefficiencies in there, and we had more people. So we built a transformation programme that covered these 6 areas. So it looked at the financial, so what we were spending, how we were spending it, but particularly it looked at the value within that. So we couldn't quantify what value learning was providing. We knew how many days, but we didn't know whether it was really having a business impact or not. And you talk to the business leaders, we interviewed a lot of them as part of this, and they said, intuitively it feels like we're doing good things, people are getting trained, but can't tell you the value that it's actually providing. So we've looked at how can we transform that to actually understand much better the value in there. We looked at the organisation structure, so we were decentralised. We had different teams in all the different parts of the business and no common way of managing it. And we looked to centralise that, so we've brought that together. We brought everyone under one common reporting structure. We've created a new structure, and I'll show you in a moment what that looks like, with a single sort of view, centre of excellence around learning. And as part of that, we also looked at what do we need to be doing internally. So we looked at things like some of the training admin, some of the training scheduling. We said, actually, that's not high-value stuff for us to be doing. There's people better out there that can be doing it. So we outsourced some chunks of our admin. That helped us to reduce some of our headcount. We looked at the partnering model and how we engage with the business, and we changed that to better engage and understand the business needs and make sure that the business needs were being fed into the centre of excellence. Then we looked at the content, and we looked at those 7,000 courses, and we were able to take out a considerable amount of duplication in there. We were able to look at what's the best for a particular need, and take out what wasn't the best and use what was the best. We were able to convert things over to e-learning. We undertook about 110 programs to actually switch face-to-face over to e-learning. Some of those of about an hour each, some of those up to 30, 40 hours in size, to switch that blend over more to an e-delivery where it was appropriate to do so, only where it was appropriate. And that changed our delivery mix and also meant we could adjust the number of trainers that we kept in-house. We looked at the whole technology piece. We looked at the system that we were using. We realised that the system that we've got is not the ideal one. We looked at some short-term things that we could do around putting a front end on that to help people get to the right learning. And then we've been undertaking a process to put a new system in. And we're not there yet with that. That will be coming later this year, that new system. And then we put in an academy structure. So the academy structure was helping people find the right learning for them in their role. So we looked at roles across the whole 100,000 people within the bank, and we identified there's 2,800 different roles. We looked at what good looks like for each of those roles, and we did that through a capability framework. So we defined a common capability framework across the whole bank, a set of 10 personal effectiveness capabilities and a set of technical, operational, regulatory capabilities. And then from that, built for each of those 2,800 roles, these are the 5 to 10 capabilities that are right for you in your role to perform well in that role. And here's the learning that builds those capabilities. We've rolled that out now across the bank. June last year, that went live to all 100,000 people and got a very positive reaction from people. They now know where to go for their learning, and they can get the learning that's right for them in their role to help them develop the capabilities for their role. There are 4 elements within the academy. So the first one is the capability framework. The second one is the learning curriculum. There's a third piece in there around professional development, and a fourth element around career paths. So if I know the capabilities to be successful, I've got the learning in there to help me develop those capabilities. There's then a link to the professional qualifications where that's appropriate to professionalise within that role. And also it shows me where I can go beyond that role in terms of future roles within the bank. And this is what the academy looks like. So this is the front page of it. You click into Start Now and it takes you in and shows you your learning. We put in a new operating model. So one of the things in Bob's presentation, one of the fundamentals was the operating model that an organisation has. So this was our operating model. I'm not going to go through all the detail in here, but just very quickly, you've got business alignment at the top, which is the critical piece of all of this, making sure that everything we do within the learning function is aligned to what the business needs, the business objectives, the business strategy, with a layer of governance to make sure we're maintaining that. And then working from the left, everything driven by our customers ultimately, and we influence our customers through our colleagues, and our colleagues are structured into strategic business units, and we have a set of partners, which are talent and development, including learning, who face off to the business to understand their needs, and then flow that into the centre of excellence, which has these other elements within it around programme management, around design and development, around delivery, learning operations, and around technology, and specialist teams within there to make sure that we're providing what we need to. We looked at the whole technology landscape, which is underpinned by a new LMS, and we selected the Sabre LMS for Lloyds. And then these other elements around the technology landscape, so looking at where we can use e-learning and the different forms of e-learning and simulation and the investment that we've made in new content there. Looking at external content and where we can use generic catalogues like the Skillsoft catalogue to underpin the sort of basic level of training and often some of the leadership elements within there through e-learning, and then we can invest in the bespoke training and the face-to-face training to supplement that. Looking at where we can use forums and blogs and things which will be coming with the new technology later on in the year. tying into virtual classrooms, and also knowing where to go to access experts or where to go to access and sign on to instructor-led training. So the new system will be coming around summer this year. We're going to move from 10 to 15 clicks to access learning, which is what it is at the moment, which includes log on with a different password and username from that you use to get onto the system in the morning, and that will be replaced by a single sign-on and less than 3 clicks to get to the learning. So that will be a fundamental change for the users of learning in terms of how they actually access it. And that should be the most visible change, I think, for colleagues as a part of what we're doing. We've also found, as we were going through this process, that rolling out e-learning to everyone, actually our infrastructure wasn't up to rolling out e-learning for everyone. So we had to make a significant investment in the physical infrastructure across the bank to support that. Nearly 2,000 of the branches that Lloyds has did have PCs, but we needed to roll out another 100 or so dedicated learning PCs into branches. We needed to create a series of model office suites around the country with PCs in there to make sure that people could go in and access some of the e-learning there, as well as some dedicated PC-equipped training rooms where people can actually book a PC to go in and do their training there. So there was a considerable additional piece that we hadn't originally foreseen, that actually to make the e-learning work, we needed to invest in the physical infrastructure as well. So how did things change? Well, as at a few weeks ago, when we updated our 2012 numbers, we'd moved from close to 1,000 people in the learning function to now about 450. And of that, about 250 of those are now training deliverers. We'd increased the number of training days from 5 to 6.5, and actually I've now got the final number, 6.9, that we were actually delivered in 2012. We'd reduced down to about 2,000 courses in our catalogue, and we'd reduced our suppliers from 1,300 to 35. We'd switched from face-to-face, which was to e-learning. So we were doing about 20% e-learning. We're now over 50% e-learning. And we now have a common structure for the curriculum aligned to the roles with a group-wide capability framework and one single learning demand plan. There's a 3,500 line spreadsheet that shows all of the training that we're planning to do for 2013. And in doing that, we've taken 20% out of the cost that we spend. So we've delivered more learning, better aligned learning, and done that for 20% less. Very quickly, to just give you a few of the challenges that we had through that. So if anyone's thinking of embarking upon a similar transformation journey, I won't go through all of these, but some of the things that were challenges along the way, making the case and getting the funding to actually undertake a program like this. Then as we went into that, understanding what the operating model was and the structure and how you align that to the numbers, and using some of the Burson research and things is helpful around doing that. Talked about the PCs, having a model that works not just in the UK, but actually we've got quite a number of people outside the UK, so design it for the UK, but then how did we make that work internationally? Getting compliance to a new supplier model, so how did we get from 1,300 to 35 suppliers? There was a lot of pain along the way and a lot of working very closely with procurement and with finance to try and get the compliance around that. And getting support for things like using more e-learning with the business. There was a reaction from a number of people that actually, we want to do it face-to-face, that e-learning won't work, we have to do this through face-to-face, and how we managed to change mindsets around that. Some of the lessons learnt, having a very clear business case around the commercial value and going on tangibles rather than intangibles within that. Looking at the whole thing as a whole, so rather than making a business case for a new LMS or a business case for some e-learning conversion, wrapping it all up into one big program meant that some of the things that perhaps didn't stack up purely on their own could stack up in a whole business case. So that was one of the big things. Get the basics right and don't drop the ball. So actually making sure that we were still delivering training through all of this change was key, and that we didn't drop that. It was fundamental that we kept that training going. People were inducted, people were receiving the training that they needed. And that's probably where I'll pause. I wanted to give you a taste of what it might feel like for the colleagues. So very, very hot off the press. So I'm going to show you a quick 3-minute video. This was launched this morning to our top 5,000 people in Lloyds at an event in Excel. So you're seeing it before a lot of the organisation. This is going to be how we present learning to the end colleague as we lead up to the rollout of the new system later on this year. I'm going to give you a flavour for, I guess, the branding and how we're looking to be presenting learning. So if the technology works, I'll look to the guys over there. It was downloaded about 10 minutes before we started the session today, so I'm hopeful. Do I need to press anything? No.
So, you went to school, passed some exams, maybe you went on to college or something, and that's it. Learning over, right? You get a job and all that's in the past. Done. If that's what you think, then you might want to get back to work, because the rest of this film isn't for you. So, why do you think you're still watching? Because you're curious. That's a good thing. Actually, that's a great thing. It's the thing that marks us as human beings. The desire to ask questions about the world around us. Try and look for the answers. And it all comes down to this. This kilo or so of spongy grey mass is the most amazing, complex structure in the known universe. It's taken us from running around in loincloths to travelling faster than the speed of sound. It's capable of incredible things, but only if it's open. Open to new ideas, collaboration, learning. It needs exercising, it needs challenging, and it needs a push every now and again. In life, learning never stops, especially at work. It's not just about getting new qualifications, though that's fine. It's about making the most of who you are and what you've got. Taking advantage of all the knowledge that's around you. That doesn't only mean going on a course every so often. Things have moved on. The world's changed for a start. We all know money's tighter than it used to be, but at the same time, technology's moved on too. So you can learn how, where, and when's best for you. From podcasts to blogs, bite-sized chunks, or entire courses. It's all there online. Learning's about throwing yourself into it, discovering what's right there at your fingertips. And technology is a great way to share experience and insights. We learn every day, by osmosis, from our colleagues, our families, our customers, and whether we realise it or not. Look at the way kids learn, absorbing everything they can. They just get stuck in, ask questions. Just stop for a second. Think back to your first day at work. How green you were and how much you know now. And where do you think all that knowledge came from? You should never stop learning. And what you want is to be supported to learn and make the most of yourself, isn't it? So go on. Who knows what you'll discover?
Thank you very much.
They've given us lots of ideas for thought. Who's going to be the first challenger? Who's going to be the first? This looks like me. Challenger in the nicest possible way.
Just a question from on the business side of Bob, I think. Just when you were calculating the costs of training per head and so on, were you including the cost of the training function itself or the spend of the organisation? Because obviously there's like an HR headcount component internally there, as well as money you spend on courses and the like and so on.
Oh, absolutely. What we try to do is define the metric as the entirety of that. So it does include all of the elements that drive the cost of L&D in the organization.
Great, thanks. And great launch on the Lloyds, by the way. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Simon, a two-part question. So when you were designing your training plan, how did you know what was the right way to go from an effectiveness point of view? And then how did you manage and measure that effectiveness after the training events had taken place?
So from the designing the training bit, we've got the partners who work with the business to understand what the business goals are and therefore what the training blend needs, or the training curriculum needs to be. So at the start is what training courses do we need to be providing. Some of those will exist already, and it's just run them again. Some of those will be things that we need to go out to the market to buy. Some of those will be things that we need to build. And then I guess as we get down into the individual programs, it's then working very closely with the business to say what are the key outcomes that you want from this. And in an ideal world, that's actually then tying that to some firm business metrics if we can, but not always. But working very closely with the business and the people that we're doing the training to actually shape what that intervention is. And then we haven't been great at it in the past, but we're trying to get better at it now in terms of actually evaluating those programs going forward, whether that's just sort of standard happy sheet stuff that we'll do for everything, or whether if it's a specific program we're investing a lot of time and money, we actually get much closer into the key metrics. And give you an example, some customer advisor training, which is for some of our branch staff. We've recently redone the induction program for that, and we went hard at trying to measure that. So we did a control group of 3 or 4 sets of people going through it, and then we had a control on the side of people doing it the old way, and then we measured against a set of business measurements on those, and that told us that actually there was a lower error rate on the new way of doing it, there was higher referrals, higher sales, better customer service, etc. And because it was isolated through 3 or 4 sessions that went through the new approach and those through the old approach, we could very clearly demonstrate actually there's this clear benefit from the program that we did.
And if I can just add a little color on that, based on all of the organizations we've studied, we've seen kind of 2 things added to that. Number one, organizations at that level 4 are typically using a performance consulting approach rather than an instructional system design approach. And so they are actually engaging with the business, try to understand what the business is trying to accomplish, and then actually developing a solution that can be then measured to see the effectiveness. Second thing is when they start to aggregate all of those over the entire organization, that governance board, whether it's a learning council or some type of other decision-making and guiding board, is actually made up of representatives from L&D and HR and the business so that they can set priorities on the investment that's being made based on the needs of the business and the needs of the business going forward over the next couple of years based on the business plans, rather than just, again, answering the mail associated with what one individual organization or division or region is looking for.
Bob, I want to take you back to those figures that you quoted. If I'm right, then what you were saying was the amount that was spent per individual was twice in the UK what it was in the States, but the amount of time that those individuals got was about 1/3. So I could intuit from that the average L&D professional in the UK is 1/6 as effective or productive as in the States. Is my logic true?
That's what it says, and based on, again, the delivery strategy. Now, there is obviously what we teased out, a different philosophy and delivery strategy for learning here than it is in the States. In the States, it has evolved into much more of a heavy emphasis of blend. And you saw what Simon reported here just in terms of their results. Just over a couple of years, the efficiencies go up substantially when you take a different strategy in terms of the way that you're going to develop and deliver learning in your organization. So many of the corporations that are headquartered there, that are still global, have taken that philosophy, and so that's the result that you're seeing. Correct.
Isn't that a terrifying statistic? I mean, I have long believed that it is a function of the deployment model. And the deployment, I have long sensed that risk appetite in the States is much higher than risk appetite in the UK. Change of a deployment model is perceived as high risk.
Correct.
And therefore, I would see that as a major contributor to that 1/6. Am I on the right?
You are absolutely on the right track, and that's why a lot of folks use our research, and Simon kind of illustrated that as a way to try to mitigate some of the risk associated with it, because the research is based on us looking at literally hundreds, in some cases thousands of organizations. So we've teased out some of that. So when we're saying this is what those level 4 organizations are doing. This is not a theory. These organizations are doing it in practice and delivering effective and efficient solutions. So if you do that, the likelihood is the risk that you're taking on is relatively low. And you can again see from Lloyds, that was a substantial investment in terms of everything they did, but the results were even more substantial and significant.
I wonder why are you using PCs in...
1 second.
Yeah. Very short question. Why are you using PCs in training rooms rather than delivering to the desktop? That seems like a bit of an antiquated model to me.
Yeah, because of the nature of some of our parts of the organisation. So for head office, where it's people are working at desktops or laptops, then it absolutely is. But for contact centre, we actually felt that the environment at the desktop in a contact centre, where you've got noise coming all around you, wasn't conducive to learning. So in those instances, we actually put training centres into some of the contact centres. Similarly with the branch, people could be doing it, but you don't really want to be out the front of a branch trying to do your learning with customers around you. So dedicated training PC out the back in a quiet area. So we looked to the environment that people were in. If we could use the laptop desktop, we absolutely did, but in certain instances we had to make that investment.
Thank you.
This is just a question that's going back to the point on the figures that you're talking about, and I wondered how much of an influence the infrastructure has over that percentage. So from a US perspective to a UK perspective, things such as bandwidth and being able to communicate via virtual classrooms. The infrastructure to support that, does that benefit from the States rather than it does in the UK?
No question about it. And it's not only, obviously, in the UK. There are other areas that we've studied that actually have substantial bandwidth, and that does contribute because it allows you to drive the solution that you're offering to various technologies, including mobile and tablets and those things that if you do have that, and now you're taking as your approach from an instructional design a more holistic view of how you can deliver that in a just-in-time, just enough, just for me on a number of different modalities, it drives that. And certainly the States in many areas, not all, but in many areas does have that capability, and that's certainly the technology push over the last several years has certainly driven those efficiencies. Good point.
I'm on the way.
It's a question for Simon. You seem to have achieved an awful lot within the last couple of years. I was just wondering what your focus is now. What's the next step for you?
Yeah, good question, Sue. So the next big thing for us is to prove the value point. So what we've done so far, while it's improved alignment and things, what we are not yet in a position to do is really show the value that learning can provide. So I think we've got all of the steps in place to start measuring that value. But over the course of the next year, the big thing for me is actually being able to show the investment in learning is getting this return for the business in terms of the improvement in performance against whatever metrics. I think if we can make that case, then it gets very interesting in terms of actually being able to make the case for more investment in learning, more and better, I guess, credibility with the business from what we're doing. And through the period of change, yes, there's one or two pockets where we've got some very good metrics, but not enough in totality. I think that's going to be the big push next.
And let me just make a comment, because we study a number of different organizations that are here and maybe a little further into level 4s. Once he's actually achieved that and has that information, more likely than not, the Lloyds is going to tell him, how do I now invest more strategically in L&D to drive more of my business results? And so what we see in those organizations, senior management's not asking L&D to cut budget or become more efficient. They are then saying, I want to make sure that in all of the alignment that you have with the business and business goals and objectives, that you're now taking that investment, just like they invest in other parts of the organization, to drive business results. Crossing over at that point, you become a strategic part of the business and contributing to that, the whole dynamic changes in terms of the way that you're seen.
Agree. Yeah.
And to really talk to the value add point a little bit further, Simon, I mean, part of what you're doing is compliance and risk avoidance, and part is performance.
Yep.
Do you prioritise across those two to be able to move towards level
Yeah.
4, or...?
Yeah, no, we have. So we've categorised our training into 4 categories, with sort of 1 being the absolute must-do through to 4, which is the sort of soft skills. And in terms of looking at our budgets and things, we have focused towards the must-dos and the keep the lights on thing, and cut back to some extent at the softer skills end of things. As we go forward, it's making sure where we are making investments in those areas, they are warranted and show some return, and we're very careful about how we do it. So I think we are looking at where we invest and the return on what we do to invest. As a scary number for our mandatory training, when we try to roll out when we do roll out mandatory training across the whole bank, it can cost us about £2 million for an hour of mandatory training in terms of the time elapsed of people doing that across the whole organisation. So if we make something mandatory across the whole bank, salary cost or whatever of 100,000 people is that sort of level. So we need to be sure that that is warranted and the value is there to actually do that. And if it's something that's mandatory and key and it takes an hour, then we'll do that. But we need to question, is there real value in doing that because of the impact and the cost associated with making it mandatory across everybody?
Where are we going next? You first. You're closer.
Thanks, Simon. My question's just around, I guess it's driven by the animation that you've just shown us.
Uh-huh.
So is that an attempt at an effort around kind of getting engagement and the culture for learning within Lloyds? Or are you already on that journey? Because that's a bit I'm really keen to understand, how you get people engaging in it. And I'm talking more the soft skill end of it rather than the mandatory stuff.
Yeah, so you'll note there was nothing in there around a new system, around a transformation, around sort of the detail of it. So it's very much intended around, think about learning in a new way, that will have all of these things that underpin it, giving people access to better learning and things. But it's very much is the engagement with learning, the challenge yourself to learn, and that's the intent. So that will be part of a communications program over the next 6 months that will get people to think about learning, hopefully in a different way, and actually prompt people to go and see the new system when it comes and to actually take up actively more learning within the organisation.
Thank you. I'll come to you in 1 second.
Hi, I just got a question, and I think it's to both of you, and it's about getting from level 2 to level 3. Because, I work in a smaller organisation, but it's very clear to us that performance really is something that's managed clearly by the operation itself rather than learning and development. And therefore, having a large-scale T&D service, actually, in some ways, we've discovered is a disabler rather than an enabler to performance, because it's somehow watering down the role that a manager plays in taking responsibility for the performance of their teams, etc. I'm just wondering whether that's something that you recognise and how you can get from level 2 to level 3 in a larger organisation.
Start,
sure, I'll start, and then you can add color. Some of the issues associated with moving from 2 to 3 really starts to become focused around the real engagement between the L&D function and the business, and understanding what the business drivers are and being able to ask those questions. Because many times the L&D function either doesn't engage or doesn't understand how to ask the right business questions in order to craft programs that are appropriate. And in many cases, they're rolling out something that is just rolled out to the entire organization without understanding the segmentation of the learner population, what the constraints are within the business, what the constraints are within that population, et cetera. So all of those things, whether you call it performance consulting or instructional system design that's focused on those segments, that's one of the key elements. One of the other key elements in moving to level 3 is starting to look at the governance and actually having involvement of the business in crafting both the learning solutions and the decision making about where those investments are actually being made. The other thing is, at that point, you're really starting to think about learning more holistically. So, in fact, you are thinking about the managers and supervisors and what their actual role is to either reinforce or actually provide some of that quote-unquote on-the-job training. But as your instructional designers and performance consultants say, oh, what is that? And what do I need to put in place with those supervisors and managers? What kind of training, what kind of coaching, what kind of job aid support, whatever that drives it? That's all part of that jump from 2 to 3 in terms of really getting the traction in the organization.
Thank you. Sorry, Simon, you can add?
Yeah, just add very quick. So for me, there's 2 elements. I think one, which is a really important point that you make, which is the line manager is absolutely key in the whole development piece. So everything that we've done there will fail if line managers aren't engaged and actually help develop their people and have the right development conversations and help point them towards the right things. So that is absolutely key, I think. And then it's the role of the learning function and potentially wider talent development function to actually make sure they're giving those line managers the tools, giving the individual the tools, and helping that relationship to work well. I think we've looked at learning somewhat in isolation. We have linked it in part through wider talent and development, and it's something that we'll be looking at next, is how we've had some restructuring and how we get that into a wider sort of capability and engagement piece. So I think we've taken the view that let's fix it first as learning, and then let's look at the bigger talent picture, how it all fits together, and pick that up as the next step.
Simon, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, actually. The first is on, you talked about analysing every role and having capabilities and identifying 5 or 10 that were priorities. That's a huge job. Did you get external help on that, or how was that done? Or have you got that in role profiles already? Yep. And then the second question was really linked into what this gentleman said around your video driving self-learn. A lot of the challenges we have are people just don't get time, the day job's really busy. So how are your managers, or how are you as a group going to allow people time to do the non-mandatory stuff that will develop them?
Yep. So first bit, so around the capabilities and the role mapping, so it was a huge job. So I guess we came up with we had a small central team working on that. So we had 3 or 4 of us at that stage, an academy team that came up with a model, came up with a toolkit, came up with an approach, and then provided essentially consultancy out to the business to empower people within the learning teams and the business teams to actually do that role mapping. So it couldn't be done without heavy engagement from the business. So they knew their roles best, and we sort of acted as a team of consultants, essentially. We'd work with them saying, this is what needs to be done, here's the capability model, here's how you run the sessions to get to the bottom of it. And we probably had about 100 people at any one time working on that across the bank over the course of 18 months, or probably at its peak, 100 people working on it. But a lot of that being from the business, looking at their roles, shaping it, and getting the right capabilities. So it was a huge undertaking, but it was what was needed to actually understand those roles, that if we tried to do it in an ivory tower in the centre, we'd have never got that right. So does that answer the first piece? Yep. So for the second one, that was around how we get people to be self-learning more and the balance there. So I think that will be a journey for us. It's not going to be something that overnight we're going to get people to change approach to. Things like that will help, but I don't expect everything to change because we've got a nice video. So it will be a gradual thing, I'm sure, over the course of the next few years, trying to change the perception that actually learning is valuable, should be being done, that we should be encouraging people to do it. It's not that people are off skiving, doing some learning, watching a video. Actually, it's a part of their job. We've toyed with should we put it into scorecards and things like that, but as of yet are not going to go down that sort of route. I think it will be a gradual cultural thing of trying to get the message over that learning is important, tying into the value bit. I think if we can show the value that learning has in changing or in driving business results, actually then people will be more open to letting people actually do the learning.
Thanks very much. I'm very conscious of time, so I'd just like to summarise by saying I think we've gathered in the last hour or so a really clear vision, and then what's important is the steps to make that vision a reality. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank our 2 speakers for this afternoon. Bob, thank you.